attention, please. You first. Good afternoon. My name is Rodrigo Obando. I program, and I know things.
And my name is Jordon Huffman, and I program, and I know nothing. So any Game of Thrones fans will get those better.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Jordan's been my student. I mean, he was undergraduate. He worked on a project that I've been working on for many years. And after that, he continued in the graduate program. And he, in fact, selected to come to do the master's instead of going to AFAC. I think he had a good position offered at the time, and he told me, no, I want to do the master's. And then he later on told me that he actually stayed for the master's, not because of the master's itself, but because of the research that we were doing. So I really am appreciative of what he's done. This time, actually, he took the job at AFAC. So, and I think it probably better pay than it had been before.
Just a little bit, yeah.
And he's finished his master. He defended his master thesis at the end of the spring. And in fact, I'm actually going to piggyback on his presentation. So it has his name in there, but I'm going to use his stuff to introduce the general area of the research. We're trying to make it not too programming, but to give you an idea of why we consider it's important. This is not only important for the things that we're doing, but we consider that it's important for science in general, complex systems and stuff of that nature. I don't know where we'll be able to convey that or the importance of what we've discovered, but we'll try. And we have good demo, hopefully. All right, so good. There it goes. All right. So instead I'm using his slides, Thank you, thank you. So cellular automata, and I don't want to go into too much of the detail on that. I'm just going to show you what it normally does. But cellular automata are cells that can compute and change their state in different ways, and they have rules that they actually make it change. And so you have a list of cells, and then they change, and then they have different behaviors. They were either, you want to say, discovered or invented by John von Neumann. Anybody knows what John von Neumann was?
Pop quiz. You all should be sure.
You all should know that, but John von Neumann, mathematician, after he did this, he was interested in how life develops. So he did this, put it on the side, and he created the architecture of the computer that we all use. You see why you should know that? Yeah, you thought that this was not college. Yes, it is. So he started with something like this, and he started exploring all that. And there's been on and off people exploring this until 1983, when Stephen Wolfram of Wolfram Alpha, of Mathematica, etc., started investigating this even more, etc. And it happens that we can create all kinds of rules in these spaces, and depending on how many cells and how many states, normally what we're going to be dealing with is things that are binary, zeros and ones. And you can actually have very, very big spaces. The elementary cellular automata space is 256, which is relatively easy to explore. 256 different pictures or rules we can explore easily. The problem is when you go and explore a little bit beyond that, and you end up with something like 4 billion rules. And nobody has actually explored that, and it's very, very difficult. There's another one where you change just the number of states or colors, and it ends up being like 7 trillion. So who's got time for that? Ain't got time for that, right? So we don't do those kinds of things. And the problem has been that we really don't know those kinds of behaviors. The cellular automata is used to investigate things in complex systems. Complex systems are things such as the weather. I mean, we think that we have a handle on it, and we think, yeah, we can tell you more or less in 10 days how the weather's going to be. And nowadays, we're much, much better. But not really that good yet. And complex systems are very difficult to investigate and to study. So this is the kinds of things that I do. In general, I normally say to the people, so what do you do? And then I say, I'm trying to investigate or research why our universe is complex. That's what I do. That's my question.
Mathematically, why is it complex?
Yes, yes, thank you. So we are dealing with big spaces, big things. So this is an example of a cellular automata. This is, we designate the things by the number that form in binary in here. But these are the rules. So for instance, we evaluate 3 cells. We evaluate each one of these. This is the beginning. And then you say 3 cells. If the 3 are black, then the next one is, the central one is white. If this one is 2 on the left are black and this one is white, then this one is white. Or like this one, if this one on the left is black, 2 white, then this one will be black. So we can do that for each one of this. Then you take every 3 and evaluate. And then do it again, and then do it again. And then it shows pictures. And in this case, this is Rule 30. Very interesting rule, because it shows when you look at the output, it's random. And that randomness is coming from something which is deterministic. That is exactly what the problem was. How can something that is deterministic, when I say deterministic, there's a formula for it, turn out something that is random, stochastic? It is strange. And this is why, we're ever interested in investigating all these things.
One thing to note before we go on, when we say rule, all we're meaning is there is a base 10 number, like the number 30, right, that we're converting into a binary number, which is here, and that produces this image. So that's what we say, that's the lingo of rule, okay? So I know there's a lot of terminology that goes into this study, and that was one of the big roadblocks initially, was figuring out, okay, what does this terminology mean in respect to what am I actually looking at, what am I doing, okay? So this is for Rule 30, right? So for Rule 80, okay, then that means 80's binary representation would go here. This same pattern, 3 black, 2 black, 1 white, this same pattern is applied, but now all of these numbers would change. Black means 1, and then white means 0. So when you apply the binary number 80, all of these colors are going to change based on the number 80, based on the rule that you're looking at. Okay, does that make sense? So the output, so these top rows, these 3 are always going to be the same, but the bottom ones, the result of that evaluation is going to change based on the number that you're looking at. I wanted to make sure.
See, one of the problems that I have with all this is that you are so deep into the soup, you can't even see the vegetables, and that what happens with for instance, Jordon, when he came in, he was all like, what are you talking about? And we have to go through so many iterations and what we mean, because the majority of researchers around the world do not work at this level. The majority of them work at a particular rule level. I work at the entire space level. So whenever I even talk to somebody else, and I have to tell them, hey, wait a second, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about all the rules. And they say, what do you mean all the rules? I said, yes, all the rules. So I'm talking about 256, 4 billion. How do I make sense of them? And they normally say, oh, but I'm just working with this one here. So that, even with researchers, is very, very difficult to come out. So I always appreciate that he will intervene and say, you're saying you're wrong, because I'm probably too much into it so that I don't explain things. Okay, but that's why I know things, he doesn't. So these are examples, and then they were classified, at least by Stephen Wolfram, in different classes. They're class 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And this one over here is a class 1. This, for instance, starts with a single cell and then it goes like that. That other one is a class 2, which is sort of cyclic. And there are some other ones that are, like that, acyclic. And then so it doesn't go necessarily down like this one, but it goes to the right. Then this one here is like 30, it's class 3, and it's random. So this right, at the right side over here is all random. There are triangles all over the place, unpredictable. This part is not, but this part is, it is. And this one, very, very peculiar, is called class 4, which is complex. The rule is such that you could program the rule to create a general computer. This is the time you say, thank you. You're good. Yeah. So when you do something like that, and then you create, this is what we call in a universe kind of thing, that the interactions of particles going through and interacting like there are particles in space. So these are the different 4 classes. There are some other researchers that have created those in different ways, etc. So I started working with this back in like 2003, and started working on these things. I had some sort of intuition, and it took me a while. I actually published the paper last year. So think about it. I started like in 2004 with the idea. I published last year, 11 years. So anyway, so what happens is that when people characterize these rule spaces, they never found a way that how they were organized within the space. So they didn't know how they were together. They normally looked at them as, we don't know what the behavior is. You know, you find some that are class 2 over here, others over here, etc. They're all over the place. So they was always considered randomly distributed. We don't know what they are. But, you know, I had that icky thing, and I said, I see something. And I started looking into that. As I said, it took me a long time. But what I found is that our the dimensions of this space are not like a regular dimensions that we will consider, where the dimensions are called totally ordered, so that you see things that are greater than other always. It happens that they are partially ordered, and they are organized in lattices. So it's a really, really strange space in how these things are organized, and that's why it was so difficult for anybody to actually see how they were organized. So I started working on all those things, and I said, okay, so let's take a look at this.
Can I make a note?
Oh, yes,
quickly?
yes, sure.
One thing to note is that where we have, okay, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, all of these things, these are like saying, this is rule 30, this is rule 50, this is rule 1257 in binary form, okay? So each one of these produces a different image, okay? And this one has a relationship with that node, that node, that node, and each node is a rule, okay? So imagine this is only, what, 9? No, what is that? 8. This is only 8. There are 4 billion in this space. 4 billion. So the bit string is not 3, it's 32 in length, okay? So this is a monstrous space, and this is only moving one step beyond the 256 ruled space, okay? So it exponentially grows. That's what I wanted to make
Yep.
that.
So one of the things that I came up with, and most people who didn't see it have not been able to see it, is actually we are sort of in a evangelistic kind of thing, trying to get people to see this, is that divided this into primitives. And I'm not really going to go too much into this, but what I did is I took the rule and I found what I thought a logical way of splitting it into primitives. And then I look at the primitives individually. And then I realized that I could have 2 dimensions of partially ordered elements that will give me a very strange view of the space. And I did that, let me see, and this is where he's going to come in a moment. What I realized is that when I look at this, and this is what maybe I'll put this. Sure. When I look at all this and I say, how are the neighbors organized, close to each other? And then I said, okay, they are sort of connected. Are they really similar to each other? So when we look at something like this, and then you see how these are similar, similar, similar. This is a cross-section of that real weird space. So we just cut it like going in geology and taking a mountain, taking it apart, then you see all the layers. That's what that does. And at that time I thought, wouldn't it be neat if we would then look at that and see, find out around it in this weird space, if there are other things that are similar. And he came in. And that's what he's going to talk about in terms of what he did for his thesis, which now is putting us in a very nice place. So,
yeah, George, sure. So the first thing that we talk about when we say, okay, we look at this big cross section here, and we say, all right, well, we can definitely see there is some kind of similarity, right? Because you have these diagonal lines here, vertical lines here, and you have this salt and pepper, this just like white noise here in the middle, and then some other crazy designs over on the right side. So when we look at it as humans, we say, oh yeah, those are similar. Well, our brains made all kinds of connections subconsciously in fractions of a second that we have to now figure out how to program into the computer and make the computer do, right? So the first thing I had to do was say, okay, how are we going to define what is similar and what is dissimilar, right? So I had to come up with a metric. Well, actually, in our findings, that I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. In our findings, we see that there is some kind of order, right? There seems to be like there are clusters of similar images created in this pocket over here, and then this pocket over here, and this pocket over here. And these clusterings, okay, is all based on the primitives, which is the partial order system that Dr. Obando created. So the way that he organized these 4 billion rules has created some kind of order where previously there was not order. So we have to, one thing I said was, all right, I wonder if when you look at the bit, right, 0, 1, 0, 1, da, 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 I wonder if this position right here, if it's flipped to a 1 or a 0, does that actually matter? How does that affect the output, right? Because going back to the previous image where we had the rule, it was all broken up into a grid, and you had each of the 8 different little options here. If I flip one of those, just one of those, how does it change the output? Okay, so that was my first thought, is there's got to be a correlation between the bit positions and what is actually generated. So here was one of my first attempts at the program here. So we're actually looking at this rule, okay, this node in the diagram, and these are all the connecting neighbors. Okay, so you can see just by looking at this is Sierpinski's triangle. For all you gamers, this is a Triforce. It's not it's a super Triforce because there's a bunch of them, right? Yeah. All right. So if you look, it is actually surrounded by, connected to, other similar Sierpinski triangles, right? We see that. But now there are also other ones that are completely different. And one thing to note that's really interesting is the way that the partially ordered system works is this has a certain binary number. Every single one of these images that we see that is a neighbor is actually 1 bit different. Okay? So as you go across, that's probably, if I had to guess, the far left bit different from this rule. Okay? And then as you go along, it's just 1 bit of change. So each consecutive bit gets flipped down the list. Okay? So there's 1 bit of change. Now, if we keep going, I said, all right, let me take a look at these guys. Now, if you notice, here's the Sierpinski's triangle. Okay? This was the original, this is the one in the middle. This is just a randomly picked other one that was there. And here are 2 other ones. These are all neighbors of this guy. Now look at the bits. Now these are the primitives. Okay, we take the rule and we split it into 2. And these are the numbers we we're seeing. Now, do you see a common point with these images across the board? looks like these two are constant, right? So this was the base image. Look, this one's flipped, but it didn't change the output. Different binary number creates the same image. Okay? This one's flipped, but it changed. This one is also flipped, and it changed. So this told me, okay, that means certain positions can be flipped and not affect the output. It's still a Serpentius triangle. Other ones can be flipped, and it moves into a different area, a different image, right? Okay, we all seeing that? Yes? And you might be going, okay, well, what's the purpose? Well, we'll talk about it in a minute. So, now, we have to figure out, all right, how do I say that this is similar to this? Because I can't just look at it, like I can't tell the computer, well, computer, look at it, you figure it out, right? I had to figure out, what am I going to do to make the computer say these two are similar? Well, I created this formula here, and all I'm doing is, I know it looks really scary and nasty. All it does is it takes this image, okay, compares it to image number 2, cell by cell, for the top row. And it says, okay, well, I'm going to see if it's the absolute value of that position in the first one, the standard, and that same position in the target, which is the second image. So if they're both 1, then 1 minus 1 is 0. If they're both 0, 0 minus 0 is 0. But if they're different, either 1 minus 0 or 0 minus 1, the absolute value is 1. And then you divide by the length of the row, all the math stuff, and that gives me a similarity measure. It gives me a percentage that says this image is 98%, 50%, 10% similar to this image, okay? So, don't really have to know. It just goes cell by cell, row by row. Okay, that's all you need to know. And it gives me a percentage. So now we get into what I dubbed dynamic bits. So we're trying to figure out the severity of bit position. Does this one, if I flip this one, does it create a different image, or does it create the same image? Can we predict that behavior? So I made this really nasty recursive algorithm, okay? It was horrendously long. And it came back with 1,160 similar rules at 100% to that Serpentius triangle. So in a matter of 3 steps, so if we start at one node, okay, and we step out 1, 2, 3 levels, it came back with over 1,000 different, exactly the same images, okay? So that means at least 1,160 different binary numbers are creating these Serpentius triangles. I said, okay, well, I had to stop that due to the size. It was actually crashing my computer because it takes so much resources. So then I said, all right, well, let me take a look at this. So we're back to that first image, okay, laid out a little bit differently. I refined my UI a little bit. So we're back to that same Serpentius triangle with the same exact neighbors. Well, then what I said was, okay, let me click over here. Let me see if I can find some correlation. So I clicked over into another rule, okay, and notice that this is what it took me to. So when I go through here, so I clicked on this guy, he became the central rule, and now it's populated with his neighbors. And if you look, in every position, so look at here. See this guy? He looks exactly the same as the one in the same position, even though we're looking at different ones, right? All right, so this guy, he looks the same, he looks the same, he looks the same. So what I figured out was, it looks like no matter where I am in the rule, I'm going to have the same layout of this one's similar, this one is dissimilar, no matter where I am in the rule. Okay? Because they're the same. And these are the same. So he moved. So it all goes back to this. I'm starting, let's just say here, I'm clicking over here, and I'm still finding that there are still similar rules. So I keep going. I say, all right, so it's like I'm moving to a different one. That's what it's doing. So I created this algorithm to define dynamic bits, right? So the dynamic bits mean if it flips, the image is the same. We saw that already before. If the bit flips, the image is still a Serpentius triangle will stay a Serpentius triangle. But now I also have to address when they change and when they don't change. So I have these 3 labels, P, N, and D. for positively significant. Now, this is getting a lot deeper than I probably need to go. But what I was able to do is I was able to say that if this bit is flipped, then it's going to look like this. If this bit is flipped and this one's not flipped, it's going to look like this. If this was flipped, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get the same image no matter what. And so I created this algorithm. That's the pseudocode. But trying to stay as in layman terms as possible. For every position marked D for dynamic, it has two options, right? And there's a little number right here, so I ran my algorithm here, and I came up with, this says 524,240, all Sierpinski's triangles, found within that 4 billion space, okay? So there's a huge amount of those types. So now, we asked some questions at the beginning, and we answered those. Okay, now here's what you guys are probably saying, probably about from the first 10 minutes of this. What is the point? How does cellular automata affect you, right? Why are we doing any of this at a games convention? What is the point? Why does it even matter, right? Who's thought that at any point within sitting in this room? Okay, thank you. Well, cellular automata can actually be used to model complex systems, weather patterns, stock markets. You can model thermodynamics. You can model textures. Okay? So what we've been able to do is we've been able to say, I wonder if I can create a texture that looks like something in real life using cellular automata procedurally. So with this, we're actually able to procedurally generate an image that looks like the pigment on this seashell. Okay? Now think about this. This is only using white and black, right? Now what if you use like a 5 or 6 color palette of brown and create dirt procedurally? So just instead of an art person coming in and drawing out dirt, this patch, this patch, this patch, this patch, we just say, make some dirt for me, given these 5 different colors. And all of a sudden now, instead of having to store that dirt, now it's generating it on the fly. Based on back looking at, okay, well this one's white, this one's black, this one's white, this one's black, I'm going to generate blah, right? So we can actually generate textures on the fly and know exactly what they're going to look like. So this is the number for possible variations of dirt that we can make. This is one number. This is how many, and that's only taking a sample of 100 across the top and then generating down.
100 cells.
100 cells. 100 cells, and then generate based on a rule. This is how many combinations, different, unique, but similar variations we can make just using 100 cells. Okay? One number wrapped across, what, 5 lines almost.
That's the Sierpinski, right?
That's the Sierpinski, yeah, that's the Sierpinski.
1160,
Mhm.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay? So now let's actually look into what we're actually talking about. So we have a demo here, built in Unity by Dr. Obando, actually implementing that exact thing. We're making 2D textures on the fly using cellular automata. The boring lingo that I was spitting out, okay, it actually means something. Now, one thing you can also think of while he's pulling that up is we can model complex systems. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's take the Sierpinski's triangle and say that that entire cluster, all of its neighboring ones that are Sierpinski's triangles, are healthy lung cells. Each bit position is a different protein that you send. When it's 0, you don't send it. When it's 1, you send it. And let's just say that its neighboring cells, the ones that don't look like Sierpinski's triangles, are cancerous lung cells. Which ones do I have to flip from the cancerous lung cell? Which proteins do I have to send into the cancerous lung cell to make it actually fall into the healthy lung cell cluster? Okay? Are you following me? It can be used to model really, really complex things. Now, we're only using binary numbers, right? 0s and 1s. That means you can actually use more than that, right? You can use we have 4 different acids that make up DNA, right? So you can use 4. You can actually model DNA with this. You can start, this can be branched out into all forms of science. Genetics, biology, as we've already seen, weather, stock markets, anything like that. So here we go. Here's an example. Yeah, you built this, so you take it, please.
Okay. So what we did is taking the definition of the cluster ID that he used. So we created what is known as a probabilistic cellular automata, which means there are parts of the rule that are random. So we don't know what they are. The moment that you go and grab them, they're actually going to flip. And it will flip in an unseeable way. I don't know how they're going to flip. The interesting thing is that they produce something like this, for instance. These two, this is in the 256 space, this is in the 4 billion space, and they look like the seashell, you know, that we had in the other thing, and then they look like that. Now, if I wanted to do this and create it as a programmer, and some of you are programmers, imagine that you're going to have a way of having all those triangles sort of show up all over the place, right? And you make sure that there are complete triangles, that they are all separated, that they are all placed all over the place, right? So you need to take a look at that globally, and then somehow go and affect each one of the bits. And then you need to go back and say, no, I made a mistake. That bit is not there. I need to flip it. Because maybe that one in particular destroyed a triangle. So I need to go back into it and go back. And then you flip between going into the detail and looking at the whole picture. Going into the detail, looking at the whole picture to see that it actually maintains what you want it to maintain, which is a global quality. But you can affect only bits at a time. So, this over here, now if you click on top of it, that one, and do it again, and every time that you do that, it generates the same kind of picture. Every bit is calculated locally. Every bit only knows about the immediate neighbors. Nonetheless, it has what is called a structural stability. I can generate as the number that you saw in here, as many as I want. And every time I generate it will be different. The likelihood of that to be the same, very, very low. The same thing with this one, same thing with this one, and we can go into showing cracked things, you know, for instance, on you know, you say a platformer that you create those things with little cells, and you know, all those things, and you see that, oh yeah, that's repeated. Now I remember he was used over here, et cetera, et cetera. With this one, you will never see 2 identical tiles, ever. Most likely. No, I'm just being accurate. So what I did with this, you know, this one creates actually the random statistics. There are all kinds of things that we're finding out. We're finding out that if you do the stats, I'm finding there are certain things that I can actually call, and I need to investigate some more of this. It's what I call it fate pockets. There are things that it doesn't matter what you do, they always end up at a particular shape or a texture.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a good one here.
Yeah, I know. But that, you know, it makes it in such a way that I need to investigate some more, so I'm not going to say any more of that. But the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that about a week or so ago, we received a HoloLens. Anybody knows what a HoloLens is? Good? So I decided to say, okay, can I actually put that in the HoloLens? And no, you cannot see it right now, but I'm just going to show you. So
we're going to have a demo at lunch.
Yeah, so here's the HoloLens. I created the demo. using the code that was written in this, almost unchanged. And then I have holograms that you can just tell the holograms to change the texture, just like we're doing it here. You say shuffle, and then it will do that thing of shuffling, and it will give you another texture. You see another one, you can say complement, which is, do I have complement in here? Yeah, reverse. So if you click on reverse, and then reverse again, you see black and white, etc. It switches. So you do all that with this. You can also drop it. You can say drop, and then it will fall on the floor.
There's your fade up there.
On
Top
one?
right.
Yes, that's one of those. So it is, one of those things. There are some that are actually very interesting to look at, but that's investigation for later. Maybe here I will recruit somebody that would like to do some research in that area, interesting stuff. So anyway, so I have a bunch of objects, cubes and seashells, etc., that you can actually interact with. You can do something like this. If you look at them, you have the cursors that you look at the object, and you do something like this, it will drop. And the interesting thing is that, I mapped the fourth floor. So whenever they drop on the chairs, they roll off the chairs, and you make them move, etc. Not many people have actually seen this. He actually just did it this morning, and I would like you to go and share it with this. It's going to be kind of difficult to do, so be patient. We only have one HoloLens, and we actually watch you so that you don't fall off the stairs. All right, and I know that we are running out of time, and I guess I'll contemplate some questions from the audience. We will.
If there are any questions, please line up.
Mike, please, yes.
I know the question is when is lunch.
I would like to know where exactly did the desire to actually look into this, because I know people who question things like this, like anomalies and what the randomness of life and everything. What exactly led you into studying this and looking deeper into it?
It's a big question.
We only have 5 minutes.
To me, it's very personal. Regardless of whatever anybody believes, I cannot explain, but the bath that you see in here that actually is able to show all these things is scary to think that something like this may happen. So I often wonder why our universe is like it is. So we could stay here for a long time. Maybe later on, come to my house.
Yeah, I know where you live.
You do that. and then we can talk about those things. Yes.
You're right, because what we're essentially saying is the universe has complex parts, right? There's lots of complexity at work at the same time. And now, no matter what happens around the universe, we're still here, right? We're still standing on Earth, and it's still intact. And all these other stars could be exploding. Light could be reaching us or not reaching us for 1,000 years, and we're still standing here because of simple systems, all working in one complex system. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, could you give a generalized explanation of stock markets and whether I get how it could create ground and objects and animals and all that. I'm kind of confused on the weather part or the stock market part.
Sure. That goes into, okay, there's your good one right there. See that?
Yeah, that's a good one.
You want me to? Or
Yeah,
you want
no,
to?
go.
Okay, so what he's done, when I click the stats button, what that does is it generates that same texture, okay? Not the same exact one, but similar ones, all through this huge layer and then compresses them down into one. So the result of this, it looks gray, right? Because the result is all of those. Each cell gets an average. So at one particular spot, across 50 images, 100 images, what's the average of that between 0 and 1, right? And that's the shade of gray that it's becoming. So there's a spot right where the mouse is, that's a black area. So that means that across, how many, is it 100?
I think
That's 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, across 100 images, that same
Oh, no, this
localized-
one is 256, I think.
256, okay. Across 256 different images, that image stayed black. But if you notice, the initial conditions up there at the top where it all started, they pretty much look the same. But then there's white noise that anything can happen in between the top and that particular space. That's what the gray means. Anything can happen. That's still gonna pop up.
Yeah, there are
So
parts that are still in there. So, to give you a quick example, because they're gonna throw us out of here. If we're able to, we're not at that point, but if we're able to say, okay, given these conditions,
in the stock
in
market,
the stock market, it doesn't matter what you do, you're gonna have this anomaly right here.
once that time here, because this is time
Right,
increases
that's
as you
time.
go down.
If we are able to do that, that's gonna be scary. So Illuminati, all those kinds of things, you know, whatever. Okay.
One more, yeah.
Have you considered or started looking at the possibility of using a design like this to predict thought patterns? For example, based on what we know of the human brain, as far as what we know, it all boils down to various neurotransmitters being shotgun blasted across a synaptic cleft, and then whether or not those bind with an unknown number of receptors, whether or not it's blocked, it's a whole bunch of kind of random chaos going on. But at the same time, people tend to have similar thoughts to similar responses and reactions like that. Have you considered kind of taking it that direction or looked at taking it that direction?
To take it in that direction, we'll need a subject matter expert. Because what we are looking at is really more generic. We will have to find somebody that actually works on that so that we can map what we found to that area. But yeah, that's a possibility.
Cool.
All types of sciences, this can be applied to all types of sciences, but you need a subject matter expert
Right.
to do that. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much
Yeah,
for coming
thank
out.
you.